Financially, Ukraine is stuck between a rock and a very hard place. The money loaned to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, while time is up to repay some of these loans. Now, most of Ukraine's allies don't want to see the financial contribution to Ukraine going towards paying these loans instead of being used on the war front. On the other hand, if Ukraine don't pay back these loans, it'll make it harder for them to procure further loans down the future. And the clock is ticking.
So joining us to discuss these implications is Volodymyr Stetsyk, Director and Strategic Management Consultant at Kearney Ukraine. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thanks for inviting me here.
So now the Ukrainian finance minister has highlighting the pressing need for a debt deal, emphasizing that the time is running out. And without an agreement, Ukraine risks defaulting on its obligations, without which could have severe consequences for its financial stability. So what are the immediate financial needs of Ukraine? How can they be addressed through international support, to your mind?
Well, first, I would like to thanks to all international partners for providing the aid and helping us during this 28 months of the war. Obviously, the long-term war versus such a big enemy as Russia is, which has comparable military spend like Ukrainian GDP and 4 times more higher population, requires huge resources. Obviously, pacta sunt servanda, agreements are to be kept, and it would be extremely important for us to get support here from our partners on debt relief, since the war is not over yet, and obviously nobody cannot commit when and how would be the conditions and when it will be over. So currently we are facing this pressure, and these discussions are really hot here in Ukraine too regarding the debt restructuring. But our resources in long-term war should be balanced between the military needs and all the other needs too.
All right, currently Ukraine is looking at 90% of its GDP, an equivalent of debt. And people are saying that if a restructuring does indeed happen, or Ukraine pays its loan a bit slower, this number will be a signifier for places to not give Ukraine further loans. And that would also impede the Ukraine's further progress when it comes to the war front. How are we going to alleviate that situation?
Well, we are trying to keep the balance and helicopter view, keeping in mind that Ukrainian GDP is okay. There is no bulletproof data in terms of statistics, so I will be relying on estimation on IMF. In 23, Ukrainian GDP increased by 10% roughly versus the GDP we had in 22, but keeping in mind the negative impact got from the war in 22, our GDP is still more than 10% lower than it used to be 21. So the part of the issue of the high GDP pressure, high debt pressure, you mentioned 90%, is explained by GDP decrease. Another component, unfortunately, it's a consequence of long-term war. And if you recall in history, all the countries facing the long-term war, they are increasing their debts. And unfortunately, that's the consequence of the war we are facing here today. And we are trying to find a good balance between 3 key pillars: weapon, money, and people. And in that case, I assume people is an essential component for us to find a balance between the forces directed to support our defense forces, people, right? And the people who are driving the economy to increase our GDP. So one of the ways to decrease the debt pressure is to increase our GDP. And that is a big task for our government to find this balance.
Now, following your thought, because you mentioned now maintaining this delicate balancing act a couple of times, so how Ukraine can really balance its immediate financial needs with long-term economic reforms?
So first of all, our government is also discussing the potential of tax increase, but keeping in mind this Laffer curve, you know that sometimes increase of tax rate will have negative impact on the income of the budget. So it's a matter for us to take a look on the issues businesses facing these days. And for the couple of recent months, I would say business is facing 2 key challenges. One is electricity outages, and sometimes they are reaching 10 to 12 hours per day. And another key threat is mobilization of personnel. So human resources are shrinking. Ukrainian defense forces are needing more and more people. And right now, already business is facing the issue of labor force because the economically active population right now in Ukraine is 30% lower than it used to be in 21. I would say I'm very careful with my statements now because it's not a good answer to say just do it. The recommendations should be very careful, and I think some kind of discussion is right now not pleasant because obviously in all countries tax increase is not the preferred measure. But in our case right now it could be really dangerous, and business is trying to bring this message to government.
All right, first of all, we really appreciate you helping us shed light on the situation. Like you mentioned, this is a very, very difficult question to put our fingers on. I think we're all trying to figure out a way that Ukraine can be out of this crisis. One of the ideas being floated around is perhaps tying the Ukraine debt repayment structure, extend that, and tying the tax structure into it. Do you think there's a silver lining there that having extended this loan maybe will persuade the international community to back Ukraine even more, to try to see it prosper, to try to see that tax structure actually coming into fruition?
Increasing the time horizon for debt repayment and even this interest payment would be really useful, but we also should develop the robust plan in terms of even post-war recovery. And again, I will come back to the human resources topic because it might be one of the key bottlenecks for Ukraine to address the challenges. So whenever we are discussing the Ukraine economy recovery plans, and for the last 2 years, it was a couple of times we had some estimations, and because of the war impact, those estimations are no longer valid. We need to rethink them, and again, that is why I'm careful with the statements. But I think we should have a couple of scenarios, and under all scenarios, it is vitally important to maintain as high human resources or labor force as possible. So we are considering a couple of dimensions, including veterans reintegrations, bringing Ukrainian refugees back to Ukraine as soon as the war is over, and obviously bringing some migrants too. So in a nutshell, we may and we should ask for restructuring, but we should also bring a clear plan, action plan, how can we deal with the challenges we are facing.
Volodymyr Stetsyk, thank you so much for joining us and providing your expert insights on the matter.